Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today in Tallinn, Estonia, by the gracious invitation of the Estonian Defense Forces, specifically the Support Command Supply Battalion. And we are taking a look at some of the guns that have been in Estonian military service. And in this case, we have a Swedish AK4. Now, we're going to talk about the history of the AK4 here in Sweden, as well as its use in Estonia. We'll start with Sweden. The Swedes started looking at the HK-G3. This is, in fact, just a variation on the HK-G3, a minor variation on it. They started looking at this in 1960. They were looking for a new self-loading rifle to replace their bolt-action Mausers, as well as their Ljungman AG-42 rifles. And they wanted something in 7.62 NATO, of course. They would ultimately spend about 5 years testing the G3, working with HK during the process, because originally they liked the concept, the rifle was good, but the German standard for service life of a G3 was 6,000 rounds. That's what the Bundeswehr required. The Swedes wanted a lot more. Initially, the Swedes wanted an 18,000 round service life for the guns. They would eventually compromise on 15,000, but they only reached that by making some changes to the design. So they're not really evident from the outside, but there was extra weight added to the bolt carriers. There was a much more substantial buffer added to the stock mechanism. And eventually this all comes together to provide a 15,000 round service life, which was acceptable to the Swedes. They got a license to manufacture the guns in Sweden at the Carl Gustaf Stad plant in Eskilstuna. And Sweden would purchase a small batch, well, purchase initial guns from HK and then start up production of their own.
If you're interested in battle rifles like the Swedish AK4 variant of the G3, you might very well be interested in the most recent book that I have just finished writing and that we just released for pre-order through Headstamp Publishing. It is Small Arms of the Cold War, Battle Rifles of NATO, and it is a gorgeous combination of coffee table style photography and detailed historical commentary and insights into the battle rifles of NATO during the Cold War, including the AK4 and more than 60 other variations of Cold War battle rifles. In fact, the AK4 that we have in the book is one that is currently in Estonian reserve service. This book is entirely original, authentic guns, no parts kits, no rebuilds, no clones, nothing like that. So big thanks to the Estonians for helping out with that particular rifle and for making it possible for me to film this video. So the Cold War battle rifle book is currently available for pre-order. Check the description text below for a link to it. And now let's get back to looking at the details of the AK4.
So despite being designated AK4, it's actually not marked AK4 anywhere on the gun. On the right side of the receiver, we have the HK markings. This one was made by HK and supplied to Sweden. They would later start production domestically. Production date, May of 1966. On the left side, we have a serial number and the three-crown marking of the Swedish military. The fire control mechanism is totally standard G3, but it does have specific selector letter designations for the Swedish military. So it's safe. The P is for semi-auto and the A is for full auto. Have our HK production mark on the trigger mechanism as well, or on the grip assembly as well. Now let's start at the back of the rifle and work our way forward and look at the differences between this and a regular G3. So first off, the stock, which is about 25 millimeters longer than a standard stock. The Swedes are statistically a relatively tall bunch of people, and so they specifically requested a longer stock. In Estonian service, the stocks continued in use. They're a little bit longer than some of the other G3s that were around. Not really a fundamental problem, except potentially with female conscripts for whom this was often a really, really difficult length of pole to make use of. If you've seen Swedish Mausers, you know that they often have a data plate on the side of the stock to correct for sight settings between different types of ammunition. Kind of funny, they basically did the same thing here on the AK4s. This is a wind correction table for the AK4 rifle. So for distances from 100 to 600 meters, this tells you how many clicks of windage adjustment you want to use for 1 meter per second or 5 meter per second wind speed. It's upside down, by the way, because when you are right-handed, You are going to be holding the rifle in this configuration, cheek on the stock, looking down the sights, and all you have to do is tilt the rifle over, and you can read that correction table. So that's upside down is actually the proper way to use it. If I pull off the buttstock, we have the recoil spring attached as normal, but we also have this recoil buffer on the inside, and that is much more substantial than the regular standard G3 recoil buffer. It's got 2 springs in it, much longer, and that's done to reduce the impact of the bolt carrier on the end of the rifle, which is going to reduce your felt recoil a bit, but more importantly for the Swedes, it's going to reduce the forces on the gun, which extends the service life. The bolt carrier is pretty much normal here. Note that it does have this serrated thumb pad on the side. That is a feature that was specifically requested by the Swedes and would eventually find its way into basically all versions of the G3, but it's intended to be a silent bolt carrier. So normally with the G3, you just drop the bolt and let it slam shut in order to lock it to chamber the first round. The Swedes wanted a way to do that more quietly, so the idea was you would slowly drop the bolt with the charging handle, and then the last bit, where it actually locks into place, you would push it forward with your thumb. Now, it still makes a fairly noticeable click when you do that, but that was the intention. Just to demonstrate this, the normal way to reload would be to lock the bolt open, put in a new magazine, and then you just do the literal HK slap, and it closes and chambers. Now, the thing here is with the roller delayed system that the G3 uses, you do need a little bit of velocity at the end of travel for it to fully lock into battery. So if I run this more slowly, it won't quite go all the way into battery. That's where the silent bolt closure device is intended to be used. So I can just push this forward. And as you can hear, it's less noise, but it still makes a distinctive clunk when it locks into battery. A particularly minor and unique change here was the addition of these 2 reinforcing ribs on the trigger housing. They are on both sides, and those are unique to the Swedish pattern, just there to basically give a little bit of extra strength to the front of that stamped housing. The Germans used both steel and aluminum magazines for the G3. The Swedes decided to go with the steel magazines. So this is, you have a Crown C here, that is a Swedish manufacturer magazine dated 1970. 20 rounds, of course, and standard 7.62 NATO caliber. For the charging handle, the Swedes went with a slightly larger, chunkier version of the handle itself. The mechanics are the same. The metal piece underneath is essentially the same. They just put a bigger plastic handle on it so that you would have a little more leverage and a little easier grip. This is also a part that will break under extended use, which leaves you with a usable metal handle, but one that's not nearly as comfortable as the big plastic grip. And then at the very front of the rifle, this does take a bayonet. It's a bayonet that mounts on top of the barrel, and it's not the same as the standard German bayonet. There's a plug that fits into this spring-loaded catch right here. So it's a distinctly Swedish pattern of bayonet for the guns. An interesting variation that the Swedes also went with was a slight change to the rear sight. So this uses a diopter drum style of sight like all of the other German G3s, but instead of a V-notch for a 100-meter minimum distance, they actually went with a 200-meter aperture and then went from 200 out to 500. So instead of 1 through 4 with a V, the Swedes went 2 to 5 with all of the options being aperture sights. These rifles were also produced by both Carl Gustafs in Sweden and also Husqvarna in Sweden. The Carl Gustafs ones will have a Crown C. The Husqvarna ones will have an HVA mark as manufacturer's mark. The Swedes went ahead and added an ejection port buffer here. It's a simple sheet metal piece. It doesn't require any permanent modification of the gun. It just snaps on over the ejection port. You've got a rubber piece in here. This was done specifically to reduce damage to blank-fired brass to make it easier to reload, or to save it, protect it for reloading. So this one's broken. You can see the rubber's broken off there. That's not uncommon. Once the rubber got old and then was exposed to the cold, it would get hard and brittle and it would break off like that when used. So that's kind of the historically authentic version of the case buffers that you'll see today. eventually, the AK4 was replaced by the AK5, which was the FNC in Swedish service in 5.56 caliber. The AK4s were kept around for reserve use, mobilization reserve, that sort of thing. And in, I think, the early 2000s, so just not that, less than a decade after Estonia took its independence, Sweden sold a significant package of arms material, defense material, to the Estonians, and that included a whole bunch of AK4s. So these rifles came into Estonia where they were used as conscript rifles. So Estonia has a conscription-based military system. Everybody has to do a period of mandatory military service, and they have rifles that are used by the conscripts during their initial training and during their service. And those are a separate batch of guns from those, or were initially a separate batch of guns from those that were used by Estonian military forces that were actually deploying on missions. So when the military went out to places like Iraq and Afghanistan, they took Galil rifles that had been purchased for the military. But conscripts doing their service at home were primarily using G3s. They had AK4s. They also had Norwegian AG3 G3 copies. We'll look at those in a separate video. But that's how the guns came into Estonia. Here in Estonia, they have since been phased out by the new R20s. That's an LMT short-stroke gas piston AR platform rifle, which we've also covered in a separate video. So if you're interested in the other developments of Estonian small arms, you can definitely check out that and some of the other cool stuff I've filmed here. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. It was a really good chance for me to get a look at a specifically Swedish pattern of G3 in its original configuration, not a parts kit build in the United States. So big thanks to the Estonian Defense Forces and specifically the Supply Battalion for giving me access to this and so many other cool guns here. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.